Please, don't hurt me." The words barely escaped through trembling lips as rain pounded the empty street. 33-year-old Garrett Holloway froze mid-step, his leather briefcase slipping slightly in his grip. There, huddled against the cold brick wall of a closed bookstore, sat a young woman, soaked, shivering, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. Her face was turned away, but even in the dim glow of the street lamp, he could see the fear radiating from her hunched frame. "You're safe now," Garrett whispered, kneeling slowly beside her, his expensive suit absorbing the rainwater pooling on the sidewalk. "I promise, no one's going to hurt you." She looked up then, and Garrett felt something crack open inside his chest. Her hazel eyes were hollow, ringed with exhaustion and something darker, despair. A fading bruise marked her cheekbone. She couldn't have been more than 26. "I'm Garrett," he said softly. "Can you tell me your name?" "Ivy," she managed, her voice raw. "Ivy Brennan." For 3 years, Garrett had moved through his days like a ghost haunting his own life. The car accident that took his wife Emma and his parents had left him with a company to run and an emptiness he couldn't name. He worked 16-hour days, ate meals he didn't taste, and came home to a penthouse that echoed with silence. His assistant, Dorothy, a motherly woman in her early 60s, often left post-it notes on his desk. "Eat something real today." He rarely did. But something about Ivy's trembling form in the rain pulled him back into the world of the living. "Let me help you," Garrett said, removing his suit jacket and draping it around her shoulders. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here. It's warm. You can have something to eat, and we'll figure out what comes next." Ivy hesitated, distrust flickering across her features, but hunger and cold won over caution, and she nodded. At the diner, tucked into a corner booth with steam rising from cups of coffee, Ivy's story emerged in fragments. She'd married young, too young, to a man named Derek, who had seemed charming at first. Her parents had died when she was 19, leaving her alone and vulnerable. Derek had been her anchor, or so she'd thought, but anchors could also drag you under. "I left tonight. I couldn't anymore. I had nowhere to go, no money, no family." Garrett listened, really listened, in a way he hadn't listened to another person in years. He saw his own loneliness reflected in her isolation, his own loss mirrored in her grief. "You can stay in my guest house, just temporarily, until you get back on your feet. No strings, no expectations." Ivy's eyes widened. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Garrett paused, thinking of Emma, of how she'd always stopped to help people, how she believed that kindness was never wasted. "Because someone should have been there for you before tonight, and because I think maybe we're not meant to carry our pain alone." The months that followed were unexpected. Ivy moved into the small guest house on Garrett's property, a cozy cottage surrounded by oak trees that Dorothy had once used when she worked late. Dorothy took to Ivy immediately, teaching her to bake bread on Sunday mornings and sharing stories about her own daughter who lived across the country. But what surprised Garrett most was how Ivy's presence began to thaw the frozen parts of him. She was quiet at first, moving through spaces like she was afraid to take up room, but slowly she started to bloom. She found work at a local art gallery, her love for painting rekindled after years of being told by Derek that her dreams were foolish. One evening, 6 months after that rainy night, Garrett came home to find Ivy in his main house's living room, standing before an easel. She'd been painting his family portrait, the one that hung in his office, from memory. "I hope you don't mind," Ivy said nervously. "Dorothy showed me the photo. I wanted to, I don't know, capture the way you talk about them, the love in your voice." Garrett stared at the canvas. Ivy had painted Emma's smile exactly as he remembered it, full of mischief and warmth. Her mother's gentle eyes, his father's strong hands. But what struck him most was the small figure she'd added in the corner, a younger version of himself, looking up at them with hope. "It's the you I see sometimes, when you're not carrying all that grief, the you that still believes in good things." Garrett felt tears he'd held back for 3 years finally break free. "Thank you," he whispered. That night, over dinner that Dorothy had accidentally made too much of, Ivy shared something she'd never told anyone. "The night you found me, I'd actually left Derek 2 weeks earlier," she admitted, her voice steady now, stronger. "I'd been sleeping in shelters, saving every penny from odd jobs. I was planning to leave the city the next morning, start over somewhere far away where he couldn't find me." Garrett set down his fork. "But you stayed." "I stayed because you reminded me that not all people are cruel, that kindness still exists." She paused, her eyes glistening. "You saved my life, Garrett, not just that night, every day after." The revelation hit Garrett differently than he expected. All this time, he thought he was simply helping someone in need, but Ivy had been actively rebuilding her life, fighting her way back to herself. She wasn't a victim he'd rescued. She was a survivor who'd chosen to trust again.
A year after that rainy night, Dorothy organized a small gathering at Garrett's home. She'd invited Ivy's new friends from the gallery, some of Garrett's colleagues who'd noticed the change in him, and a few neighbors. It was simple, just food, laughter, and people who'd somehow become family. As the evening wound down, Garrett found Ivy on the back porch, watching fireflies dance above the grass. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" Ivy asked, her voice soft but clear. "I said a lot of things." "You said, 'You're safe now.'" She turned to face him, and in her expression was everything she'd become: confident, healed, whole. "I want you to know, you're safe now too, Garrett. Safe to be happy again. Safe to let yourself heal." Garrett felt the last piece of frozen grief inside him melt away. "We saved each other, didn't we?" "We did," Ivy smiled, "and we're gonna be okay." Dorothy appeared in the doorway then, her eyes twinkling. "You two planning to stay out here all night? There's pie inside, and you know I don't share well." They laughed, real, full laughter, and followed her inside, into the warm light of home. Sometimes kindness is the bridge that carries us from our darkest night to our brightest morning. We never know whose life we might change simply by choosing to see someone, to care, to reach out a hand when everything says to walk away. In a world that can feel cold and cruel, being safe and helping someone else feel safe is one of the most profound gifts we can give. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.